effects. And that would have started off a chain reaction of so many different things, because maybe the film would have been picked up by a mainstream studio instead of being made with Netflix. And, there's a bit like what we said with Partin sending Hoffa to jail, which just kind of it causes a chain reaction. This could have been a chain reaction as well, because I don't know if you've been following, but Netflix and the film studios are basically at war with each other. And there's so many. The Irishman was used in a kind of tug of war thing. And it was kind of used as an example of how cinema is changing, and the creative people. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm going off on a tangent again, but the creative people in Hollywood are moving away from mainstream Hollywood, and they're exploring other avenues, and they found streaming platforms who are only too happy to accept them because they've got the money, they've got the dough to dish out, but at the same time, they're trying to build reputations for themselves. Netflix are so desperate for a Best Picture Oscar, because that will, cement them as a bona fide official film studio. And obviously Apple are now wanting to do that, Amazon, and there's so many others now. Even I think Paramount have a streaming platform, and they're already a film studio. But yeah, it's a changing landscape. It's a changing world with movies, I think.
Well, I think the possibilities are endless with the new platform. I think they can make good movies if they really want to. They can move, because there is a platform for it. And there are so many, like you said, there are so many other avenues now that you don't have to. And I think the trending. People are not going to the theaters anymore, obviously, for obvious reasons, So yeah, I mean, is it still wonderful to see a film on a big screen with all the bells and whistles? Yeah, I think it is. But with the advent of home theaters, people being able to afford sound systems and get that theater experience in their own home, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Why would you want to go jeopardize yourself getting COVID, getting sick, spending the kind of money that it's going to cost to do it, when you could actually just stream it and watch it in the comfort of your own home when you want to watch it, not have to get up and go out. And I think that's a trend we're seeing. I mean, more people. I know myself. I pulled my back out a few times, and I had to order groceries, and so it's literally. I mean, people are becoming more homebound and more. The advent of this, Zoom. Being able to communicate this way, you don't have to have expensive offices. You don't have to have.
Yeah, I mean, look at us. We're on two completely different parts of the world, and we're having a conversation as if we were sitting, next to each other. It's amazing.
Absolutely. We can see each other perfectly. We can hear each other in real time. It's amazing. So I think the advent of what's happening, the trends, these studios have to get on board, and they have to understand these streaming platforms and what is the capabilities, because they're losing their venues, they're losing their theaters, and they have to prepare for the future, right? So this is the future. It's happening now. So
in a way, it's unfortunate for the cinemas themselves, because they're kind of caught in the middle, because the studios are okay, because they've got streaming platforms as well. Like Disney have these tentpole movies that they release. The Disney owns Marvel. So they've got all of those films, but they have Disney Plus, a streaming platform. So they've got, both sides of that pie. And then you've got the exclusive streaming platforms like Netflix. So everybody's kind of trying to eat up the market, but the poor cinemas are the ones that miss out, really, I guess. I mean, they have to find a way of innovating so that people would rather go to the cinema. Because, I mean, there's so much incentive not to, because, I mean, like you say, with COVID and everything, but I mean, it's so much easier to just turn on a streaming platform, see what's on, see what's new, see what's being released, and watch it in the comfort of your own home. You can pause it, you can go to the toilet. And I know the whole thing about a theater experience cannot be matched, but even as you said, some people are able to build home theaters where they get that same experience or a similar experience to a theater. I mean, I myself, I like the idea of going to the cinema to watch a film, but there's so many. I've got so many issues with it. Like, for example, the cinemas in my area only show those kind of superhero films and all that kind of stuff. If there's a kind of, if there's a really kind of artful film that I'm following. I think, you know, I want to watch that. I'll check this listings for the cinema near me, and it's not even there. And then you have, you know, other issues like people in theaters being disrespectful, you know, on their phones, all that kind of stuff. And there's so much nonsense
Right.
that can come with watching a movie in a cinema, the rising costs. And it's so, I mean, it's just one of those where you kind of think, you know what, I'll just stay at home then. And,
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
cinemas need to kind of up their game. They need to find a way of surviving, really, you know.
I don't think they are, Shaz. I really don't. I don't think they're going to be able to compete in the near future. I don't see it. I mean, if I was an investor and they said, look, you know, we could build you this beautiful theater and blah, 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 and, you know, for a fraction of the cost, whatever, I would say, nah, I think it's a bad investment. I just don't see theaters staying in the forefront for very long, unfortunately, because I love to watch a movie in a theater too, just like everybody else. But there's something about that big screen experience, you know, the popcorn, the, you know, being around other people. But like you said, you know, you got rude people, they're talking, and you have to get into an altercation with somebody. You know, you got your home theater, very inexpensive sound bars, audio stuff, speakers. I put in a sound system with 9 speakers, and I love it. And I never will. You know, I mean, it duplicates everything in Dolby Digital, and I have all the formats because I have a AV receiver, and I get the sound that I want with a 65-inch TV, and you know, I'm spoiled now. I mean, you know, watch whatever I want, whenever I want, and at my own convenience. You know, I don't have to deal with idiots. I got to tell them to shut up or get into a fight with somebody because, you know, they're being rude and they're antisocial, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, I think I hate to say it and I hate to see that happen, but I really don't see how theaters are going to be able to flourish or compete, you know, in the near future.
Yeah, because there's been many things that challenged cinemas. You know, you had the advent of television, you had VCR, and all of these kind of things. And there was a lot of talk that, you know, cinema's going to die out, it's going to kill cinema, but it never happened. But this time, you know, you kind of think, you know what, cinemas are actually in some kind of trouble. I don't think they'll die out, but definitely, you know, the main way people watch movies is probably going to change.
No, I think cinephiles, you know, really hardcore cinephiles that want the experience of being in a cinema, there's always going to be like an art house film theater somewhere, a dark theater where you're going to be able to go and just zone out, you know, and tune everything out. You know, a lot of times, you know, also you have that aspect, right? Where, you know, you're at home, you have disruptions, you have, you know, things, phones going off, people coming in and out, situations where the old days you go into a theater, like Marty used to explain, you go in and you could just go off into that world, right?
Yeah.
And you can just experience that world in a darkened theater where it's just you and the characters and what's happening and other people enjoying similar moments. That part, you know, is definitely still desirable for a lot of people.
And, you know, the collective experience as well, because sometimes you have those, you know, annoying moments in cinema where people are, as you say, disrespectful, and usually it's with a certain kind of film. You know, these kind of mainstream, you know, popcorn films, it tends to happen in those movies. But there's there's times where everybody is on the same page, everybody's thinking the same thing, everybody's reacting the same way to a certain scene. I mean, it's a bit like The Irishman, where in my theater, when Sheeran actually kills Hoffa, that scene, everybody was so you could feel it in the room. You know, everybody was like, "No, just don't do it." And then when he shoots him, and you hear Pacino's little cry, like like that, and then he shoots him again, and there was you know, a few women gasped, but everybody was like, "Oh man, he actually did it." I mean, I kind of knew he was going to do it because I knew the story, but it was like, you know, and you can feel that. And so I understand when people say there's experiences in cinema that you can't replicate at home, but it's getting one of these stages now where people are weighing things up, and a lot of people are saying, you know what, I'd rather stay at home. And it's unfortunate for cinemas.
But what about, and also that the scene prior to that, the moment that that De Niro, as Frank Sheeran, obviously, and Jimmy Hoffa have that moment in the car where they embrace, where you could see the tension that, the dilemma that Frank's experiencing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that whole thing on a big screen, and to see that whole thing, and then to actually, you could feel it in the theater. You could feel people like reacting to that moment, how heartfelt that was,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and that's another situation where where a communal. If you go there with your, like you said, you go there with a mate, or you go there with your significant other, or whatever, and you're watching it, you could grab them, and you both feel it, those days, where you could actually feel the emotion, and feel that and experience it together.
Mm.
That part,
I just was reminded that I think, we're talking about annoying people in cinema. I think when we were watching The Irishman, I think I was actually one of the annoying people in the cinema, because what happened was, because me and my friend, I mean, we talked a lot about The Sopranos, but obviously that didn't get recorded. But I know you're a big fan of it as well, and you're Steven Van Zandt. But he was in The Irishman, if you remember. He was singing in the scene where Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night, and when me and my friend saw him, we both kind of looked at each other and we just burst out laughing. So you've got an intense scene between Pacino and Pesci, and you're seeing two titans on the big screen, the only time they're on screen, and me and him are trying to stop our giggling and everything, because it's so weird seeing Silvio Dante, who's got this very famously hoarse voice, and he even imitates Pacino in The Sopranos. He does that, just what I thought. And now he's in a film with him, and he's got this, he's obviously, it's a voiceover, but he's got this sway voice and everything. And I just find it hilarious. We just couldn't stop laughing, and people were getting looks as well. So we're talking about annoying people in cinemas, but I'm being a hypocrite here. I was the annoying person when we were watching The Irishman.
No, I was the same way. I had to sit up for a minute and go, no, is that is that Stevie Van Zandt? No, it can't be. And I'm thinking to myself, that's him. And then he starts singing, right? Whatever it was, that Jerry Vale or whoever he was playing, right? And he's singing in the Jerry Vale voice. It looked so, it was so out of place that I did the same thing. My reaction was to laugh too, like, no, really? And it was another it was like an awkward moment, right?
Yeah.
It was a very awkward situation to see on film, right? And see right before your eyes, because he is so identifiable, right? I mean, if you're a Sopranos fan, he's so identifiable with that pompadour and that that hair, that hairdo he has on The Sopranos.
Well, he obviously worked with Bruce Springsteen, didn't he? And I imagine that's where Scorsese picked him up from. But Scorsese hasn't seen The Sopranos. I remember him saying he's only seen a few episodes, so he probably wasn't aware of the iconicness of Steven Van Zandt as Silvio.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't think he'd be cast in that role, because it was really distracting and it took away from a really kind of, intense scene.
Yeah. and Ray Romano said something similar. I don't know if you remember, in an interview he did, where Marty had no idea who he was.
Yes.
When they were telling him about, did Ray Romano, everyone loves Raymond. And Marty was like, no, I never saw it. So he had no idea who Ray Romano was, which is kind of funny, right? When you think about it.
I mean, I used to love watching Everybody Loves Raymond. I thought it was really good, and
it was a funny show. Yeah.
Yeah, he said that it probably helped him get the role, that Scorsese didn't know who he was, that he was known as a comedian.
Right. So it didn't give Scorsese a preconceived idea of, what that character, meant in the lexicon of TV, of television.
Yeah. But it's interesting because this isn't the first time Scorsese's done things. I mean, I remember because my mom, when she watched The Irishman, she loved it. The themes really resonated with her. But she says he shouldn't have cast the guy from Everybody Loves Raymond, because I couldn't stop seeing Raymond. I thought he was going to say, Deborah, and all the kind of things he used to do in there. But I mean, when I watched Casino, it was very early in my life. Now I didn't know who Don Rickles was. It was only
Right.
a long time after the film I learned that he was like some kind of legend of roast comedy, and just walking in, insulting the entire room and walking out. And I've seen clips on him on YouTube. He's so funny, and I do wonder, like, if I knew that going into Casino, would I be able to take the character seriously? Because he plays a really stoic, serious casino manager, and it's like you'd half expect him to crack a joke or something. Did you experience anything like that? Because I don't know how I would have reacted if I knew who Don Rickles was.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, when there were a couple in that scene where he comes up before De Niro comes up to me, and he asked me to take my feet off the table. I had another whole tirade on him that I went off, and I called him a Jew fuck, and I called him a bald-headed Jew fuck. Why don't you go get some fucking hair? And I thought it was great, and everybody laughed after. And Rickles, it was like my moment to like give it back to Rickles, right? It was like I was giving him a little bit of what he's given people, his whole career, that sat in front or whatever in his stage act. Brilliant. So everybody cracked up, and after Marty yelled cut, everybody cracked up, and Rickles turns to me and goes, I'm going to tell De Niro what you just said. He says that wasn't funny. But, he was laughing. He got the kick out of it. But I went off, and improvised because his character was Jewish. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not, have no racism whatsoever in my bones. But I felt in the context of that character, in the context of that scene, it would be great. So what happens is a few scenes later, Joe Pesci's character berates Don Rickles in the casino, and he calls him a bald-headed Jew fuck. So I'm thinking, oh, thanks a lot. You had to give him the line.
Oh, okay. So do you think that's actually what they did?
I think so. I think so.
That's interesting.
Only because, and I'll tell you why, is that I went to visit Joe. We have mutual friends, so I went to say hello to him after we had done our scene, and he congratulated me, said I did a really good job. I found out from Sharon Stone several weeks later that I did a really good job, right? So in my head, I'm thinking I did such a good job with that scene, calling Rickles' character bald-headed Jew fuck, that they had to use it, that Pesci wanted to use it. And, it would be a little bit redundant to use it, everybody calling him a bald-headed Jew fuck, right? So they gave the line to Joe, or let Joe say it. Now, I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming that. But I know I did my scenes way before Joe was filming that scene at the, at the table with Don Rickles, when he comes into the casino and he wants a marker and all that stuff. So I'm assuming that that's how it happened, because I had done it, prior, because all my scenes were shot in the beginning of filming. There was a week lapse between the first day of filming I did with Joe, when he slaps me and everything, tells me to go back and apologize. So there was like a week in between, but it was at the beginning of production of principal photography. So I know that I got that line, that berating line to Don Rickles out prior to Joe doing his. So I'm not saying that that was the case, but I thought I had done it well enough that, it would have been added, it would have been left in, because like I think we discussed yesterday, the cuts that Marty chose for my scene, I was like, wow, he cut it that way. It was so quick, and it just didn't make sense, because I had a whole improvisational thing that we worked out that I thought was very good, that I thought they liked, because Marty laughed. Whenever you hear Marty laughing behind the monitor, it's a good sign, right? So I figured they loved what they did. They were going to keep it in, but that's not how it ended up at the final cut. So, yeah, but Rickles, getting back to Rickles, yeah, he's something else, man. He was something else.
I really like it when he's all polite to you, and when he goes back to De Niro, he's like, "Fucking asshole, won't budge." It was a very, because I mean, it's like one of those, in customer service, that's kind of the impression that you have to keep a nice face, and that's what it seems like was happening there. And then this is the reality of what people are saying behind your back as a customer, calling you an asshole and all this kind of stuff. I thought it was quite funny.
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time in Vegas casinos in situations like that where the management has to suck it up. They can't, they can't be rude. They can't say what they really feel about you. You're a customer. They don't want to piss you off. And back in those days, you could have been anybody. You could have been connected. You could have been, so you didn't want to piss off any customer, regardless of what they look like, how they were acting, because they could have been connected guys. They could have been connected either to the mob, or they could have been connected to the casino owners. They could have been somebody, a somebody. So you never really wanted to be rude, or as far as casino management was concerned, until you actually knew who they were.
Wow. Do you remember which character you originally read for in Casino? The one that had a few lines you were saying.
God, I don't. It's been so many years.
Did they tell you about doing a Southern accent before that?
You mean for Casino?
Yeah. So did they tell you
that?
No. So
because the characters that were like cowboys in those days that were actually in the casinos weren't necessarily like the Texas stereotypical Southern accented cowboys. A lot of guys were cowboys that were from different parts of the country that, were there, or they dressed, or they just liked, they liked the uniform. They liked that cowboy outfit kind of a thing.
Because I was just wondering, maybe if it was that, they wanted the Southern Sound character, that, the character that De Niro berates, because he says he's an idiot and he didn't catch on to the scam, and he fires him, sorry.
Yes.
And then that leads a chain of events. I thought maybe that's the one that they wanted you for originally, or you read for.
Possibly. Yeah, it's possible. I don't know. I mean, I guess when he saw me going off, and going off on De Niro in the improv in the audition, on the callback, maybe he, obviously he saw a different way to go with me, that maybe he'd have more fun working with me as the belligerent cowboy than the one that's supposed to be all straight-laced. I don't know. Possibly. That's a good point. I never thought about it until now.
But all these stories you're telling about, behind the scenes of Casino and how you got in and changing the roles and all that, from the outside looking in, it shows you how much work goes into a film, how many people are involved, how many things evolve, and how many things can change and based on certain things. Like, imagine, for example, if you were ill and you just didn't turn up, and they could have rewritten the scene or had the scene taken out or got another acting in at the last minute. It's just something I'm just thinking about in my head, that there's just so many different variables involved, and to come out of the end with a semi-decent film must be an achievement in of itself. And then you've got a career like Martin Scorsese, where each film is just a masterpiece after masterpiece. It's insane, really.
It's constantly putting fires out. I mean, there's always something going wrong. There's never been a set I've ever been on, and I haven't been on that many, but there's never been a set, whether you have a Scorsese picture with $100 million budget or a low budget film, where there isn't something that goes wrong on a daily basis, on a minute to minute basis, hour to hour basis. There's always something going on that shouldn't have gone on, that has to be dealt with. And there were several actors in Casino that freaked, literally got cast. And one story I had heard was that one guy was cast, they flew him in from LA, an accomplished actor. Now, I don't know who it was, but it was somebody who had, had credits, who had done, it wasn't like his first day on the set. And he freaked. He literally left a note for production and his driver, and he took off and flew back to LA because he couldn't handle the pressure of doing this character. And Marty was like, what? We got this whole day around this scene. And I think it was the original banker that was cast, the guy who played the banker. And he had the scenes with Sharon Stone or with Robert De Niro and discussing, the money and all that stuff. So I think it was that original character that was cast. So they had to recast it, and they had a whole day of shooting where they had to shoot other stuff because everything planned for that day. Because the guy freaked and he said, I can't do it. And he apologized, but he cost the production hundreds of thousands of dollars because in his head, he couldn't justify being there and doing the work or being able to handle it. That's how nervous he was.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Had many credits, worked before,
Because I mean, another thing that I get from talking to you is that how much of an actor's performance in the final cut is so little related in some regard to his actual performance. Like sometimes it's a case of, or in all cases, it's a case of which cut does the director use, or which take, or there's so many, an actor's performance is shaped in the editing room, so to speak. That's the kind of, what I'm getting from speaking to you and all your experiences on these films.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You do your thing. You hope you do the best. You do several takes. You do whatever you got to do. You improvise a line here or there. You put something in, or you take something out, or whatever. And evidently, I mean, not evidently, but eventually, your performance is shaped by the director, how they want to perceive or portray that scene. And like I said, I mean, I was shocked to see how delineated it was, my takes and the scenes I did shoot, how they were condensed the way it was. And I was shocked, and I know I'm not a name, I'm not a person that deserves to be having a lengthy scene or whatever, but I know what I did constructively, and I know that I did have some good work there that he chose for whatever reason not to put up. And and then I was kind of disappointed as well because of the way it was cut and chopped. And it almost made me look like, well, this guy, something's wrong with the scene, or to me it was disjointed. It didn't flow like it did when we actually shot it, and the different takes that we actually did do. So I was kind of, curious as to why he chose that. And I know he had a lot of cutting to do. I know that originally it was way over 3 hours long, and they had to bring it under 3. So where are you going to cut from? People are paying to see Joe, Bob, and Sharon, and they're not paying to see Craig Vincent or any of these other periphery characters. So where are you going to trim? You're going to trim from the smaller, performances, or the lesser actors, or the less meaning actors for the film. I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, as an audience member, you never kind of think or assume that, because you just, like that scene, it's a memorable scene, it's a great scene, and your part in it is great. But it's like watching it, you just think you would just think that was it. It was written in the script that way, that this is just how it's going to happen. And then talking to you shows that no, that isn't the case. And then it makes you wonder about, all the different films you've seen, how much more was there, that had to be removed, that had to be changed or shaped in a certain way. And it kind of, I guess that's why there's so many director cuts, alternate cuts, and all these kind of things, that why there's blooper reels and, so many extended scenes, deleted scenes, and all this kind of stuff. It makes more sense talking to you as an actor, that because there's so much more that goes on that us as audience members and the people watching the stream don't realize when watching a film. Just assume that this is the way it was envisioned at the beginning before they start shooting, and it was all hunky-dory. Like you say, And what I've heard from a lot of other actors, filming is just, it's just constant firefighting.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I'm the first one to say, if I see a take, or I'm privileged enough to sit in Video Village and watch the rerun of the scene as they're watching it, over. I know instinctively, and I know if I'm doing a shitty job, or if I'm doing an okay job, or if I'm really like on point, and everything is like, I'm on all 12 cylinders firing, I know that. And I know there were at least 2 or 3 other takes in my scene, in my stuff with that whole thing with De Niro, with Don Rickles, that could have made it, that should have been in there, that I think, not because of ego, not because I wanted to see my face on screen longer. It has nothing to do with it. It's all the characterization and performance, and what seems right and what doesn't, what works, what doesn't. And I was, like I said, perplexed as to why he chose to chop it up and keep it as short as it was, and not bring back. And the only thing I could figure was he had to cut somewhere. They had to cut time somewhere. And I was just chosen. Like I said, I was lucky, and I felt lucky enough to even be, because a lot of actors shoot scenes that never make it into the final cut. They'll shoot a complete scene, even several minute scenes that just don't make it in, and for whatever reason. But it wasn't because I felt like, my performance sucked, or I wasn't spot on, because I know I was. But it just, he decided to choose to cut whatever he needed to cut, and just, tell his version of what my character was supposed to be about that quickly, and move on. So, that's...
Imagine working for Terrence Malick. Have you heard how he cuts his films?
No.
So Terrence Malick, the director of Days of Heaven, Tree of Life, and a few other films here and there. So he's famous for this, and many actors don't like working with him, like established actors like Christopher Plummer has. He obviously he's passed away now, I think, but he mentioned this a couple of years ago. But he basically films a film. There might be a script, a loose script, but there's so much improvisation, and he shoots hours and hours and hours. And then once it's said and done, he literally takes years sometimes editing the film. He shapes the entire story in the editing room, and as a result, there's been famous actors. Like, I think the biggest example was the, is it called The Thin Red Line? I think it is a war movie. And I think the story goes that Adrian Brody turned up to the film's premiere thinking he was the main character. That's the impression he got. And he brought his family and everything. And he wasn't even in the film in the end. His entire character was cut out. Either that or he was reduced to a cameo. But Malick was famous for doing this. And I mean, it sounds like what you're telling me, just taken to an extreme level. But I mean, that must be just agonizing. And then you can see why a lot of actors don't want to work with him. But it's just one of those, I guess.
Yeah, that would be a little embarrassing, right? You bring your family, you go, Ma, I just did this lead in this film, and I want to share it with you. Come and see, what I did, and then like sit there with egg on your face, right? Like, what the fuck? What happened? Yeah. Well, to a degree, I felt that way too. I felt a little bit like that, like, and especially with The Irishman, because I'm telling all my friends and family, look, this is a big role in my life, and everybody was so happy for me and couldn't wait. And it's like, I'm waiting to get feedback and hear people, and they want to be so nice, and they don't say anything, like, and I had nobody say, oh, gee, what a great role you had, or whatever. The silence was deafening, as they say, right? It's like, nobody knew how to say, Jesus Christ, it's not the film you told us or the role you told us about. Like, and now I'm thinking to myself, are they thinking I was lying, maybe? They think I was bullshitting, that I had a better part than I explained to them, So I'm thinking to myself, this was kind of embarrassing to a degree. And I had boasted about how this character was and how integral it was and everything. And then all of a sudden it turned out to be as condensed and, as short as it was. So, yeah, I definitely can relate to that scenario.
Yeah, look it up after we're done. I mean, there's some horror stories from actors working with Terrence Malick, but because he's such a high-profile director, when he gets it right, he makes some real special pictures, really artsy pictures that a lot of actors want to work with. I know Christian Bale's done a few films with him, but some people just want to stay as far away as possible because of those kind of horror stories like Adrian Brody.
Well, that's a thing where I guess it's ego too, right? I mean, it's where these actors, maybe get a little bit too full of themselves and think that, that they should be the lead. And that's another habit that a lot of these actors get into. They get into the business for the wrong reasons. They get in, they get a starring role, or they feel that their face and what they do is so important that it should be like, it should be the main focus 24/7. Just put the camera on me, let me talk, and I'm so brilliant and great that, you're going to want to rivet yourself to the screen watching me. It's purely ego and ego-driven and eccentric, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing some stories. So, there's stories of actors who've made creative decisions for certain films for the sake of the film and the character, as opposed to, I mean, they're sacrificing themselves being on screen more. Like the story of, for example, Jack Nicholson turning down the role of Michael Corleone in The Godfather. I mean, why would you turn down a role like that? It's amazing. It's just incredible. It'll be etched in history, but he turned it down, not because of money or anything like that, because he said that it should be played by an Italian-American actor, someone who would be more authentic, who would do a better justice. So he's thinking about the film. And it's that kind of mindset to me is so amazing because, the alternative is he could have said, yeah, I want to be in this film because I want my face plastered all over it. But he deep down would know he's probably not the best person for the role. But I love hearing those kind of stories because it shows just how much the actors care about the actual craft as opposed to their own ego or maybe money or something like that.
See, Coppola did an interview and said he had nobody else. That's why I'm wondering who offered Jack that role, because Scorsese, Coppola says in many interviews he only had one vision of Michael, and that was Pacino. There was only one actor.
I think the studio were pushing to have a star, and obviously Pacino wasn't as well known. And and then I think that was the kind of the rift. The studio wanted a name as Michael Corleone. Coppola wanted a no name, and not just a no name, but he was fixed on Pacino. He knew there was something about this guy that was special. And the story. Sorry.
The same with Brando. The studio didn't want Brando.
Yeah.
And Coppola pushed and said no. So he fought for his actors if he wanted, because he saw it. He saw what they were and what they could do. And thank God. I mean, think about it. Think of how.
Listen, Nicholson's a brilliant, great actor. There's no doubt about it. But could you see him as Michael Corleone? I mean, can you envision any other actor being in that movie other than who was cast?
No chance.
I can't. So I mean, if he was offered that and he had, and that was the true story that he turned it down, I just don't. I think maybe he was again self-grandizing himself, because I know inevitably it wasn't, nobody else was thought of. I mean, I don't really see that Nicholson was actually offered that and that he turned it down. I mean, he may have been thinking that, and obviously that's very admirable and very admirable, but I can't see that was a legitimate scenario, that he was offered the role and turned it down.
Maybe it could be an exaggeration or something, but I did hear him say it. So maybe it's, it could be him, saying, "Oh, I turned down the Godfather" kind of thing. But I don't know. But that he said that, and that was his reasoning. That
Yeah.
He
No, but
also
I wonder if
mentioned
anybody.
there was one other reason. It was that there was no scene. The script that he was sent, there was no scene between his character and Brando's character, and he was a bit disappointed in that. So there's that. So maybe, if they did include the scene of that, he might have changed his mind and he wanted to star with Brando, because he did want to star with Brando, and he eventually did. There's a film called I think it's called The Mississippi Breaks, a Western film, and Jack Nicholson pretty much only did that because Brando was in it, and it's one of those where you want to work with the greats.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, maybe it was early on, and they, they did offer it to him. I mean, it could have very well happened, but I just know that, obviously from what I heard straight from Coppola's mouth, that he had nobody else envisioned, and that they did try to force feed a lot of different actors down his throat and demand that they had these names and other, people attached that, Coppola just didn't want, not obviously because they weren't brilliant actors or actresses or whatever. It's just, he had his vision, thank God. And he fought for it,
And
So
the story behind it is amazing. That Pacino was scared that he was going to be sacked. Any day. The studio were trying to fire him. Coppola was fighting and fighting for him. Nobody could. Everybody's like, what is it that he sees in this guy? This guy's nothing. When is he going? I think a direct quote from one of the studio execs is, "When is he going to do something?" And so when that scene happened where he shoots the Turk, Solozzo, Virgil Solozzo, then everybody changed their minds. Then they kind of thought, whoa. And it's still, one of the most iconic scenes in film history. Such an amazing scene, so much tension every time you watch it.
You could see Pacino's internalization.
Yeah.
He had to kill the guy, right? It's all in his face. I mean, camera's just right there, right? And you could see the internalization of what he's experiencing, what he's feeling, like how he's going to kill this guy and what he's got to do. He's like, everything is a million miles a minute in his head, how he's going to shoot this guy in 1 second, right? That was the scene that they said, okay, well, now we get it, right? That they saw Pacino do, right? I guess that was the turning point for Coppola in securing Pacino, right? Before he was going to get fired.
And that little old guy who's a nobody is now known as perhaps the all-time great, if not one of the all-time great actors. So you just, again, what I was saying before, that there's so many variables, you just never know. Maybe the greatest actor of all time is just, working at Burger King or a taxi driver, and he just never got his big break. Who knows? It's amazing. There you go.
Right here. I know there's a role. There's a role there. There's a role that I could blow the doors off of.
Yeah, it's still out there.
Huh?
You never know. You never know.
Hey,
just find out what Scorsese is doing after Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I could be the male Clara Peller. I don't know if you remember her. Remember that old lady? Where's the beef?
Nah, you remember?
Remember that commercial? It was a Wendy's commercial. Anyway,
maybe we didn't have it here in the UK because obviously we don't have Wendy's.
She became a huge star just by saying, "Where's the beef?" And she was like 90 years old when she got cast, right?
Wow.
She became a multimillionaire just from this commercial. It ran and ran and ran for years. And, maybe I'm still breathing. There might be a shot, right, Chaz? There might be one last shot for me.
Maybe De Niro does some research and he comes across this interview and he's like, I remember that guy. Let me get him for the next big movie. You never know.
I'm gonna somehow, without like personally sending it, I'm gonna send it to him. When we're done. So make sure you edit it great and you put everything in we need to put in, because I'm gonna get it to them somehow.
Go for it.
I guarantee you, it's not gonna come from me because I don't want it to look like self-promoting anything, but I assure you, somehow between you and me and the lamppost, I'll get him to at least see a condensed version of it, or
maybe it's
however
time
long.
to dust off that
Huh?
number from your acquaintance who actually gave you his number for the Irishman.
Yeah, I have a feeling he wouldn't be an acquaintance of his after that. You know, for finding out who gave him. And the funny thing is, he never asked me who gave me his number. He just probably assumed he gave it to me years ago. I don't know, but he never said, you know, how'd you get my number? You know.
I mean, it was a positive thing in the end, you know, because he you know, you were in the film, so it's not as if, you know, they wanted to flog you off. You know, who's this guy? They clearly knew that, you know, you could have done the business, and you did in the end. You were in the film.
Yeah, I mean, and they had to sign off on it. So, you know, obviously, casting had to get them my audition, right? I mean, they're not just casting's not gonna look at it and then sign off and say, okay, he's cast. I mean, both Marty and Bob had to see it. So evidently they liked what they saw, like they did, you know, years ago on Casino. So, you know, which makes me feel good. But, you know, in a process of going through to getting in to begin with these guys, casting, unless your agent or you have a rapport with the casting director, or the director likes you, you're never going to get your whatever you have to offer to get in past that preliminary step. So unless you have a great agent or you have a rapport with a certain casting director, you're never going to get seen by that director unless that director knows you personally or has seen your work. So somebody like me who's still relatively unknown, I don't, you know, have a following, I don't have a lot of work that people can relate to. So in my case, I'm always going to keep auditioning if it ever comes of it, but I don't have an agent and I don't have that anybody submitting me towards anything. So it's either, you know, do what I did, is contact Bob direct and send him a text. And that put me on the radar, you see. If I were to go through the usual route of the agent submits to the casting goes through it, says yay or nay, brings you in for an audition, then you have to go from that step, the initial audition, to the callback to the final job. That's how it's normally done. But in my case, I reached out directly, thank God, and thank God he thought enough to give me consideration. I mean, he could have easily said, you know, thank you, but no, you know, he didn't have to go that extra step and get casting involved and put his 2 cents in and say, you know, let's see if this guy can work with us, you know. So inevitably that's, you know, that worked out. Yes, it worked out in my favor.
You know, on a semi-related note, I was actually doing some research for a potentially upcoming video on the channel about nepotism in Hollywood. And it's shocking just how many people are related to each other. You just never really assume, because people have different surnames and everything. But the more sometimes you think to yourself, why is this actor who is not very talented, why is he constantly shoved in my face? Why is he in every movie? Why is Hollywood trying to make him or her a thing? And then you see, oh, his uncle is this person, or his dad is this person. He's connected. He's got his foot through the door in some way or another. That's just something I was thinking about with what you were saying about, you know, connections and that. This was interesting.
Well, you know, for instance, now I think the world of this guy now, right? And I think he's very talented, and I think he's a terrific actor. Is Mark Wahlberg. But when he first started, you know, he was like from this boy band, right? He was a singer guy. He was Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch guy, right? Now all of a sudden he's like in another stratosphere. Like all of a sudden you see him from being this character, Marky Mark, he was a singer, to all of a sudden being on A-list directors, working with A-list directors in A-list films, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. I mean, you know, and I'm thinking, okay, so this guy became a multimillionaire being Marky Mark. Okay, now he's got a billboard on in Times Square, right? All of a sudden now he's coming into a little bit of fame, right? But how does a guy like that go from a singing guy to a guy that is doing A-list films and becoming a big major movie star. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he's somehow in the background paying for part of the film. You know, he's producing it. He's putting up some of his $1 million, $2 million. I'm thinking, because how else could this guy be thrown into that arena without paying payola, or, you know, having a connection here, getting there? And eventually he was able to prove himself and show his wares. But how does a guy with no name, no money, no connection, how does a guy go from obscurity to getting a shot of a lifetime and becoming a major star, you know, or being able to work with the likes of a Scorsese or a Spielberg or, you know, any of the top guys, Tarantino? How do you get those roles, you know, if you're a nobody and you're still good enough to do the work, to be able to do the work, but how do you even get past that, you know, those initial stages of being cast in a film like that? It's like hitting the lottery.
Yeah, I mean, even in the UK, because I was doing a bit of research for a video, and many of the more famous, most of the actors who come from the UK, who are well known, come from theatre, and in the theatre scene, they all know each other and they've got connections, and they all essentially went to the same school, places like Oxford and
RADA. What about RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts?
Yeah, and they people who are educated in private schools. I was reading a statistic. They make up of about 6% of the UK's population, but they're massively overrepresented in the entertainment media in terms of singers, actors, TV show presenters, all this kind of stuff. Most of these guys know each other. So it's very interesting. So I mean, imagine being someone who's trying to get their foot through the door. You don't know anybody, you know, because Hollywood loves a rags to riches story. But the more I see, the more I learn, the more I research, and Hollywood actors like to say that, yeah, I was, you know, a nobody, and I was discovered, and, you know, they love talking about it. But in many cases, there was connections, and it's here.
Sure.
It's true here as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, listen, you could bang on a door all day long. I mean, and they'll slam that door in your face, because unless you're presented properly, with the way things are presented, how they're, you know, people get cast, how actors get cast in Hollywood, and, you know, there's a protocol involved. There's a certain protocol, and like you said, unless, you know, you have that connection that could circumvent, you know, step A, B, and C, and you can go right to step D, then, you know, then you got to struggle. And for years, you could be struggling in obscurity and never be looked at or never be considered for anything more than, you know, a day player or an extra, whatever. Doesn't matter. You could have all the talent in the world, unless you have that extra push and that extra, you know, connection to get you to that next level, you're screwed. I mean, you got to have talent. There's no doubt about it. You got to be able to produce once you get to that step. I mean, you either have it or you don't, or you're not at that level yet. But when you get there, if you get there eventually, it still takes an act of God to actually get you cast, and especially get you cast in a major role with a with a major director and a major something that you could really sink your teeth in, a role that's going to take you to the next level. You know, it's I don't know, understand, you know, so to me, it's like hitting the lottery every time you get cast. You know, every time I've gotten cast, it's always been like, wow, I can't believe it, you know. So, yeah, it's the odds are not in your favor.
So
for any kind of stability in this business.
So, Craig, I mean, there's one, before we finish up, there's just one question I want to ask you that I already asked you before, but because I referenced it in this video, I know my subscribers are going to keep badgering me if I don't ask. You mentioned, obviously, you know Steve Schirippa, and he doesn't have a very fond opinion of Robert De Niro, because obviously my fans are fans of Robert De Niro. A lot of them, they're going to ask, why does Steve Schirippa hate Robert De Niro so much?
Listen, I mean, maybe I should call Steve and have him tell you.
That'd be brilliant.
Right from the horse's mouth, because I don't know. I really don't know. I mean,
I'd probably be on Steve's hit list, because I think you've seen, haven't you, the video I made on Talking Sopranos, where I kind of criticized it. I wasn't the biggest fan of the podcast, and I listed him as one of the reasons.
Yeah. Did you ever hear back from him or anybody from that show?
No, no. I mean, I didn't contact them or do anything like that.
I mean, did they see it? Did nobody commented about your video?
I don't think so. No. It was just something I threw out, because I just wanted to give my 2 cents, in case anybody was it, because I made a lot of Sopranos videos, and I'm a big fan. If anybody's interested in what I think of the podcast, here it is. But it's just because I mean, you know what, I really appreciate him, and I love the kind of ball breaking and the fact that he's himself. But it's just one of those. I mean, it's a bit like The Irishman, where people expected Casino, Goodfellas, and then they got The Irishman, a different kind of film. I expect when an announcement was made that there's going to be a podcast about The Sopranos by The Sopranos actors, I think I envisioned something else. And because so many other people have done Sopranos podcasts, just normal random people like me, and they've done a really good job analyzing all the details and this symbolism with the tree in the background, all this kind of stuff. With Michael Imperioli and Steve Schirippa, it was just kind of 2 guys shooting the shit in a lot of the podcasts, which is great, but it just wasn't what I was probably expecting. So I didn't think it was all that. But if he sees my video, I think my name will be on his because I think he's got a list, hasn't he, of all the people that he hates. And
he's got a hit list. Yeah, he definitely, and he makes no bones about it when he discusses his disgruntledness towards certain actors and certain people. I mean, he even busts Michael's balls about it, and he says, when I was on the set, you never looked at me, you never said anything to me. And Michael Imperioli says, well, what did you want me to do? Kiss your ass? And what was I supposed to do? I mean, they have a banter there. It's hysterical. I mean, it's like, and Steve goes into his tirade, like why he hates certain individuals, like Pat Cooper, and who's also a personal friend of mine who I always liked. But I had an instance with Pat too that I could see, and it kind of turned me off against him too, where I can understand where Stevie's seeing him in that light, where before I didn't, until something happened to me where he was kind of disrespectful towards me, and I could see that, I could see Stevie's justification for thinking Pat's an asshole, basically.
So what's your theory on why he doesn't like De Niro so much? Because it seems he brings him up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe, because Stevie's a great actor. From what he's come from and knowing him like I do, and what he's done with these characters and everything, Stevie's a good actor.
He's an amazing actor. I mean, that's one of the biggest reactions from Talking Sopranos, was that people were saying he's so unlike his character from The Sopranos that it's amazing that he was able to play such a kind of bumbling, sweet, and kind of
kind of dim-witted, right?
Yeah,
kind of dim-witted, dumb.
Yeah,
dumb. You could, he's completely not that way at all. No, I mean, I've known Steve personally when we first landed in Vegas, similar within a few months of each other. He came from Brooklyn, I came from upstate New York, and we knew each other, and we were friends throughout, many years. I didn't know he wanted to be an actor. He knew I was, or struggling, doing plays and stuff around town, but I never knew him to want to be an actor. All of a sudden, he's on The Sopranos, he's on my favorite show, God bless him, and he's doing a good job. You know, he's doing a really terrific job.
Mm.
But as far as the De Niro thing with him, I don't know. I mean, I'm as perplexed as you and everybody. I mean, I don't know. Only he knows, and maybe Michael knows. Maybe they brought it up in one of their podcasts. I don't know. But I can only assume, and then, you know, I don't want to, you know, assume something that is totally far-fetched, but I'm thinking maybe he's reached out to Bob on numerous occasions, or maybe his agent, who he's got a really terrific agent. Maybe they reached out for roles that, you know, Stevie could have easily been great at, played in one of Marty's movies or Bob's movies, and maybe they just rejected him. Maybe they just, as simple as that, or they didn't consider him for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, I can't see. I mean, other than maybe him trying to reach out humbly to Bob and Bob just blew him off. Maybe that could piss him off. I don't know. That's, like I said, an assumption. I'll have to ask Stevie someday, you know. But I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know why he's so pissed off at him.
Well,
I know.
I had to ask you that question, otherwise I'm going to get executed by my subscribers for having this opportunity. Someone who knows Steve Schirippa, and this mystery of why he hates De Niro so much, and not asking you the question.
Yeah, I mean, I did find out why he hated Pat. I mean, I did ask him actually just a few months ago. We text back and forth. So I did ask him, and I kind of had an idea why. I just wasn't sure, and he confirmed that was the reason. And I understand it now. I understand why he was pissed off at Pat, because Pat can tend to be really mean-spirited sometimes. He could be very, very bold in what he says, and sometimes he says very biting, sarcastic, and mean things to people that he doesn't like, because Pat doesn't give a shit either. I mean, what you see is what you get with Pat. If he likes you, he likes you. If he doesn't, he's going to tell you, and he's going to express. And that was another reason that endeared me to Pat for so many years, was that he basically told it like it was. He didn't. You knew what you were getting with him, good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
And that's the way Stevie is, you know. So maybe, you know, the clash of personalities, they're so much similar. Maybe they've had a clash of personalities that way. I don't know, but yeah, he did confirm why he can't stand Pat. So I understand him now, you know, understand him a little bit more. But with De Niro, I don't know, man. Your guess is as good as mine at this point.
I don't know if I'm just making this up, or maybe Steve Schirippa was talking about somebody else, and I've put De Niro in my head. But I think
no, you're right.
No, I mean, as in the reason why. I think because when he was in Vegas, I can't remember, was he a bodyguard or not? Sorry, a bouncer or something?
Yeah. He started out as a bouncer. Yeah, he started out.
He met loads of people who were famous or became famous. And now he's famous, and it's one of those where he remembers the people who were rude, and he kind of, it's one of maybe that a situation arose where De Niro did something or acted in such a way that he thought was rude, and then he remembered that, as he tends to do with the grudges, which is kind of funny.
Well, what's interesting is he did have a scene in Casino where he was a guy at the bar. It was a scene where my other good friend, God rest his soul, Joey DePino, who played the guy, the stabbed gambler. You remember him, the stabbed guy?
Yeah.
In the scene where with the pen.
Yes. Yeah.
In Casino. Well, he's another good friend of mine. I've done a few movies with him, and we became friends. We worked together as on a film that we both produced, and we also acted in a couple of projects together. But Joey DePino was in that scene, and Stevie Schirippa was in that bar scene too.
Really? Can you see him? Can you see him in the shot? I'll have to rewatch.
Yeah, you can see him real quickly. He's talking with the girl, and then Bob De Niro character says something to Heidi, to the girl. He says, "Hi, Heidi," whatever, and he's talking. Stevie Schirippa's talking to the girl, and they're all at the bar together. Joey DePino is talking to the girl, and then the girl was talking to Steve Schirippa on the other side.
Wow.
So it's a brief scene. If you freeze frame it, and you could see Stevie in the background there. You could see him,
I think
pretty
he
pronounced.
mentioned that once as well. I think,
Yeah, he didn't have any lines, no dialogue, but he was in that scene, in that stabbed scene where Joey gets stabbed with the pen
Interesting.
by Joe Pesci. Yeah. So maybe it had to do back then. Maybe he was nice to Bob or something, and Bob acted bad. I mean, I see. Unless you know the guy, Bob is De Niro. I call him Bob because I know him now and whatever. But he's the kind of guy that's so quiet. He won't even. I mean, he very rarely talked to me. He said a few words to me on the set, and he's the one that brought me on, basically, really. But he's so quiet that maybe Stevie thought that he didn't want to talk to him, that he was being rude. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
I've heard he's really shy. He's really difficult to interview, and it can be misinterpreted as, I don't want to be here, I don't want to talk to you, kind of thing.
He's come out of his shell a lot. If you watch recent interviews within the last few years, and with that whole Trump thing, he's really come out a lot as far as voicing his opinion, talking, and not being so shy. But prior, even on the set, when we were doing our scenes in Casino, we'd rehearse, we'd do the scene, and then he's gone. Boom. It's like, what happened to Bob? Where'd he go? He's like a ghost. So he doesn't expel a lot of time or energy where he doesn't have to. It's like he's focused. He's like laser focused on what he has to do. And when he's not doing it, he's gone. He doesn't talk. Joe Pesci will sit and kibitz with everybody, joke around, have a good time. Bob's gone. He's in his trailer. It's like he has no time to waste doing anything other than what he's supposed to be doing at that particular time. So, I mean, maybe again, I'm assuming, I may be completely wrong, but maybe that had something to do with it with Stevie. I don't know.
Interesting.
Maybe that scene, maybe he was trying to warm up to Bob, and Bob just kind of blew him off. I don't know. Maybe that stuck with him, that he felt offended. Because that's very well possible. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I probably would have thought the same thing. I'd feel a little hurt, by the fact that he didn't come around or talk to me or spend any time with me, So I don't know.
I mean, there's probably the added fact of that. I'm guessing, that Steve Schirippa would have been a fan of Bob De Niro's movies. So it's one of those cases of, don't meet your heroes, because, you see your hero face to face and then you get blown off, and it's like there's an extra resentment there because you're really hurt.
See, that's a great point. Absolutely. There is that saying, right? Never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Because you may be disenchanted, you may be you may fall short. Keep them on that pedestal, because once you find out who they really are or what they are, it deflates that whole image you have of them. So yeah, could be, absolutely. But I'm telling you from experience, and from the limited time that I did work with these guys and who they are in the casting process and what have you, these guys are the most giving, the most they want you to excel. They're not there for ego. They're not there to make you be their what's the word I'm looking for? Their scapegoat or their lackey. They want you to excel and make the project better. There's no ego. There's no pretension. There's no anything other than class and integrity all the way with these guys. And they're awful generous and awful good to you, to everybody on that set. So, maybe his silence or his quiet demeanor is misconstrued oftentimes, or if he's disinterested in you or doesn't say anything to you or maybe walks away, it's not meant to be, I don't think it's meant to be personal or a diss in any way. I think it's just his nature, his focus, his ability to just do what he's got to do and not expel any more energy where it's not needed for him.